This is Season 3, Episode 2 of my modular journey. And today we're going to be taking a look at the Afterlater Audio Temps Utile. Or is that Utile? It's probably Utile. I think it's French. I picked up the Afterlater Audio Temps Utile around the beginning of August of 2022. It costs around $199. Looking like Micro Ornament and Crime's twin brother, the Temps Utile initially appears much more straightforward in its functionality as a clock generator and modulator. However, dig a little deeper, and this unassuming 6-clock generator shows itself as quite a powerful utility. But I was surprised how much you can do with this 6-channel generator. Why I chose Temps Utile? When I was putting together the sequencer rack, which has all the sequencers and bitbox and some other non-vocal toys, I thought the addition of a clock modulator would be nice. Along with Temps Utile, I also bought 2 more Ornament and Crimes from Afterlater Audio. I really dig their stuff. I could not seem to find an affordable clock multiplier to save my life. Dividers up the wazoo, but multipliers seem to be either non-existent, lacking outputs, 1 to 2 outputs is not going to cut it, or they're ridiculously expensive, hundreds of dollars. What surprised me after diving into this module while planning this episode, I discovered this is not just a simple 6-clock generator, but quite extensive, in fact. For $190, you can't really beat that. How I plan to use Temps Utile. Originally, it was just going to be for the 6-clock outputs, but since diving into all these other modes, I can certainly see where randoms, bursts, logic, and trigger gate sequencing can come in handy. But mostly it'll be, at least initially, it'll probably be for the clocking. So to take a quick look at the hardware here, it has a beautiful 128 by 64 pixel OLED screen. It has 2 trigger inputs, which have a threshold of 2.5 volts. We have 4 CV inputs that are plus minus 5 volts, so that means they're bipolar. Beautiful. And then we have 6 outputs here for clocks. 5 of them are digital, and 1 of them, channel 4, is DAC only. There are 2 clicky encoders for navigating through the channels or up and down through the parameters. Click to edit and click to select and things like that. All the things you would expect. And then there's these up and down buttons that have short and long press functionality. In fact, all 4 of these gadgets have long press capabilities. Some of these modules have an either way option for power, so you don't have to fret over the red stripe. So to quickly talk about the software, in here there are 7 modes available per channel. There's a clock division and multiplication mode called MULT. There's an LFSR, which is a linear feedback shift register. There's a random mode, pretty limited random mode. There's a Euclidean pattern generator. There's logic and or, XOR, not and, not or, and exclusive not or. There's a 4-user pattern, maximum 64-step trigger sequencer. There's a burst generator, and there's this thing called DAC, which is kind of like its own little submodule, including a binary 5-bit sequencer mode, another random values mode, a Turing machine, LFSR Turing machine, and LGTC. I'm not really sure what that stands for, but it's a logistics mapping. I think it's a chaos machine. And then finally a sequencer ARP, which is just a 16-step sequencer or arpeggiator. That's a lot of stuff to pack into this little thing that you're marketing as it's just a 6-clock generator. Nope, it does a lot more. Let me mount this in the case real quick while you go walk your dog. So before I power on, let me talk about the fact that there's not a whole lot of information on the interwebs about Temps Utile. There's the GitHub, development site, which has some decent documentation as far as the general use of the thing. But I mean, on YouTube even, there's not really a whole lot of videos. At least I could find very few videos on Temps Utile. But fortunately, Afterlater Audio themselves do a pretty good job of documenting at least the basics of their own modules or their versions of them. For example, how to save and load and reset things when you bugger it up royally, which I have done to this module. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. So to reset this module, I think it's similar to Ornament and Crime. You have to hold down the up and down buttons simultaneously when you power on. So here goes that. When you boot up holding the two buttons down, you get into this little menu where the left encoder click will exit the reset settings page. Clicking on the right will actually commit the request, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm just clicking that once. And once it's all done, we are now back on all 6 channels are set to MULTs. All the triggers are set back to TR1. All the settings are reset. All the CV mappings are nuked. Nice and clean. Nice clean slate to start our demo here. Let me see. Can I zoom in? All right. So I zoomed in. It's very dark. It's very dark. I just want you to see the screen up close for a minute. Every one of these channels has a mode option where if you right click, again, navigation is up and down for here, across the channels left and right there with the left encoder. Click and then select, and you can see all the different modes that are there available. On channel 4, there's an 8th mode available here called DAC. So also observe that on every one of these channels, whatever mode you're in, they all have MULT and div, phase, percent, and pulse width as standard options in the top three options there. Depending on the mode you pick, the bottoms might change because there's different settings. Like for random, there's this rand. For Euclid, there's Euclidean. There's 3 patterns or 3 options for Euclidean. On the burst channel, there's different burst settings like density, F initial, and damping. Down here on the sequence, you have sequencer number and the editor of the sequence, turn on and off notes, and the play mode. As far as the rack goes, I have a few things set up here. You can see on the sequencer cam, I've got Renee set up to do some stuff. I've got data here that I moved up next to Temps Utile so I could watch what's going on with the different pulses. All right, so for this first little quick demo, I'm going to plug right into 1. So channel 1 here. And then 1 goes to data, and then out of data up here to Renee. So when I start the clock for channel 1, which I'm going to do down here by switching this over to INT, you can see Renee starts going up here. I guess I could turn up some sound. Let's see what I got. So as far as the voice set up, Renee's x-axis out is going down here to plates, volt per octave and trigger. I know you can't see that, but trust me, it is. And then plates is just going out to the mixer on the side here into monsoon for a little splash of reverb. What's going on here is that this channel is doing 100 beats per minute, no multiplication or division, and it's just telling Renee to play its pitches and gates. So if I come down to MULT div and tap to edit and then turn it up, you could just see that the clock speeds up, right? So if I turn it down, the clock divides. So for channel 2 out of Temps Utile, I'm going to send this over to Ornament and Crime over here. That's going to throw an envelope up, which then comes over here to, again, something you just can't see right off the screen over here is just a VCA for the quad VCO here. Let's turn that up. All right, so I'm going to try to resync these. So you kind of hear what it's doing, right? Let me turn up that second voice a little bit. So the point of this was to just show the 2 voices singing alongside one another. And now I'm going to turn up the multiplier on the second voice. Get a little triplet action going there. So you can see it's also triggering the envelope really quickly. So the next thing to really show is what this phase percent does. I'm going to use channel 2. The best way to sum it up, is, at least in my brain, is that it kind of adds a little swing to the channel. So I'm going to raise this phase percent up a little bit at a time. So again, this is in tempo, and then this is out of phase, meaning it's giving a little bit of a delay before it actually triggers the trigger. And how far can you go with this? So the maximum value is 99%, of course. It does not go into the negative. I'm going to resync. To show what pulse width does, I'm going to have to yank out the envelope. And I'm going to have to go directly into the VCA here. Let me turn down the lead voice real quick. So what you hear now is a very slight tick, right? Look at the yellow trace on data is the pulse width of that channel. So if I come in here now to pulse width and raise it to, let's go up, just go up to 100. The trigger, the 25 millisecond trigger is a little burp right there. And then the 100 millisecond is this wider gap. So now I'm going to come back in here and we're going to make it even wider. So that's all pulse width is. It's literally, whether it's a trigger, it's tiny, or whether it's a gate, it's large. So it's kind of, think of it that way. However, when you're triggering an envelope, like I was doing earlier, it doesn't really have that effect because all the envelope generator wants is a trigger. So let me turn this back down to 25. I don't know if you just saw that fancy trick I just did there. I just set it, I slaved everything back to TR1. There is no TR1 in here, so it basically shut everything off. If I turn it back, if I want my whole song to start playing, boom. Beautiful. For the next mode here is LFSR, which is the linear feedback shift register. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't really understand it all that well, but I am going to plug channel 2 into data, and then I'm going to come over here and switch this to LFSR. So look really quickly down the panel here. We've got, again, our standard MULT div, phase percent, and pulse width, but now we have something new called LFSR length, which sets the length of the shift register between 4 and 31 bits. I don't know if it's bits. And the next one down is LFSR-P. The document says that this is from 0 to 255 is the probability of the least significant bit flipping, with 0 being 0 probability, 128 being 50%, and 255 being 0% as well, which is what the doc says. You would think 255 would be 100%, but that may not be how bits work. Things of interest to me, though, are the taps, which are 0 to the length of the LFSR. So again, if you come up here to the length and you jack this up to 31, now tap goes from 0 to 31. Versus if you have this set to 8, like it was, then these taps don't go higher than that value. So I'll just leave PX at 128, which is 50% probability. And what do I want to do? I want to turn this to an internal clock. And this is going to go down here to rings, and it's just going to strum rings. You can kind of hear something there, right? All right, let me turn down the reverb a bit. All right, so up here on the green trace, you can see what that looks like. So if I come in here and I turn up the LFSR length, let's go to 16. Now you can hear some dispersion is a little different. Tap 1 and tap 2 are the same, and the document says this is which bit to XOR with LSB when updating the shift register. What? I have no idea. Let's just hear what it sounds like. I'm going to crank this up to 4. So you can kind of hear the pattern is modifying. It's kind of modifying itself, right? Let's go up to 8 on the tap 2. Let me see if I can fix rings now. So that's kind of it for LFSR, at least for now. For the RAND section, I'm just running something out of channel 3 here, which is now going up to Renee's Y-axis. So it's just counting 16 steps, and it's burping out CVs that'll change the pitch of the A111-6, and that sounds kind of like this. So right now we have RAND is greater than 0, meaning anything. That's why you hear the gate opening every time. So the blue trace on data shows the gate opening, and of course you hear the sound. So I'm going to turn up RAND to like 4. And just notice the pattern changing. Now if I go all the way up to like 16, which is halfway to the top, you could just hear it doing this less, right? So now you kind of hear my little song coming together, right? Moving along, for the next mode, we're going to look at Euclidean. Let me hop on down here to 5 and flick that into Euclid mode, EUCL mode. The Euclid N is the slots in the pattern. The Euclid K are the fills of the pattern. And Euclid offset, of course, offsets the generated pattern, so you can kind of tune it a little bit. If there's something you like, you can tune it better to your melody. So right now I have it set to plus 11, plus 7, and plus 5, just to show off that what Euclidean does. I really love what Rings is doing here. That real bassy thing sounds wonderful. Honestly, Rings is pretty awesome. Let's see, what else do we have? We have a logic mode. I'm just going to pick on this voice a lot here. Let's switch this out of Euclid and go into logic mode. Put everything back to kind of normal here. So what you have in logic mode is you have these 2 or these 3 parameters here. Logic type, which is AND, OR, XOR, XNOR, not AND, not nor, and that's it. And then you have these operands, which, as far as I understand it, this is taking whatever's going on channel 1 in this config, whatever's going on in channel 1 and whatever's going on in channel 2, and anding those, oring those, not oring those, exclusive oring those, logically to decide whether or not this channel 5 burps out a signal or not. So in order to do that, let me fire up the old timer again. And then let me come on in here, and now, so what this is now saying is channels 1 and 2 have to be high before something triggers. So whenever you see green and red up at the same time, that's an and. So let me change this to or. So now this is channel 1 or channel 2 being high, which they both are a lot, because channel 2 is on quarter notes, so it's always going to fire something off. So let's change this a little bit. I don't know if I like what... Oh, is this even making sense? Anyway, so that was demonstrating what logic kind of looks like. I'm not going to go through all these modes because there's a lot to this. All right, I have not played with the sequencer mode much. This is probably not going to be very good, but all I want to do is plug something into a hi-hat sound on my bitbox. I'm going to come out of channel 6 on Temps Utile, so that means we move over to channel 6, and we come up here and we go into seek mode. So now the sequencer mode is a little bit different because it's a little bit more extensive. So let's roll down some of these options. Sequencer mode, of course, MULT div, phase percent, pulse width, but then you have this sequence number. And if you click into that, you have user 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 16-step patterns in this sequencer. Let's hear what the pattern sounds like first before I start editing it. So there's the pattern. You can see the little dot. Maybe you can see the little dot moving underneath the pattern here. Let's get on in there. So here you can see the dot moving along. So if you then highlight and click the note, you can see it's actually shutting off one of the hi-hats. So again, this is just a trigger sequencer. And this is just one pattern. So now if you see how it says number 1 here, I don't know if you can make this out on the screen, but there's a number 1 here. So if you up arrow that, it goes to number 2, and then up arrow again is 3 and 4. So there are 16 patterns that you can set up on this thing. So in order to you can actually set the pattern length in here too by going all the way to the end with the right encoder, get all the way on this very last blip, and then you turn, or the right encoder, and now you've got your repeating pattern of 8. And of course you can come up here, pattern 2, come to the end, bring it down to, you could have 3. What's the smallest you can go? 3. Yeah, so that's the smallest you can go. Anyway, so the point of all that is that now you can come up here to the play mode, and here you rotate this, and now it's going to play sequence 1 and then sequence 2, which is only 3 lengths. So you can see it changing here. So it's an interesting way of making polyrhythms if that's what you chose to do. If you needed more than 16 steps, if you needed 21 steps, you could chain sequence 1 and sequence 2 together. Here you can do all the way through all 4 patterns. And if I come up here and if I start getting stuff going, so that has interesting implications. But again, think about all of this coming out of what I thought was a 6-clock generator, and you have all these triggers running all this equipment in this rack. That's very impressive, and I'm kind of in love with this module now. All right, moving into the final stretch, we're going to just reuse the sequence channel here to show off bursts. by just switching it up to the burst channel here, because we're going to just use hi-hats again. So right now what we have here is we have something called density, which is a value of 1 to 31, and these are the number of pulses per burst. I mean, it goes up to 31. 31 pulses sounds pretty crazy. We have this F, or initial. This is a 2% to a 200%, and it is the percent of burst speed for fine-tuning. It is whatever this percent is of a clocked frequency. So if you're doing 120 beats per minute, I guess it's 100% of that, or 50%, or 150%. Then there's this last unique setting here, damping, not dampening. You don't dampen your electronics, you dampen a sponge. Who said that? Was that the unperson? Damping determines the decay response growth behavior of the bursts. Without any more babbling, let me just turn this on and start fiddling with some knobs. So here we go with burst. Again, remember we're using this for the hi-hats. All right, so I'm going to come in here and turn on the internal clock. And then I need to trigger it with something. So I'm going to use this burst source on TR1. And who do I want to do that? Let me just grab a trigger out of marbles. All right, so we have marbles. T1 is triggering the burst, which is on an internal clock speed. It's set to only do 2 bursts. Let's slow this down. Let's go to 20% here. Now I'm going to jack up this amount of bursts to like 6. So you hear every burst that's generated is generating 6. Let me drop those down a little bit. 4. So if you bring the initial value down even further, they're pretty quick. I guess the marbles was still ticking away because I don't have it. I didn't turn it off. That's pretty cool. All right, so the very last thing I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to demonstrate because I have no idea how to use it. It seems like it's pretty extensive. I'm going to go into this DAC mode here and just kind of show what these look like. So there's a binary sequencer. This is a 5-bit sequencer mode. How can I describe this? Bin is a 5-bit sequencer mode described as a primitive sequencer where the channel on-off state determines the output value. Whatever state the other 5 channels are in has some kind of determination of what comes out of this particular sequencer mode here while in bin mode. And again, I don't really know what that means. I'm just kind of reading the documentation, so sorry about that. There's another random generator here. It kind of spits out random values as a weighted history based on the last 1 to 8 outputs, which is the depth, and some weight factor, which is the weight. You can see here there is a DAC offset, there's a range, there's a randomized history, and then there's a history depth. Here's another Turing machine, which goes along with my Allen up here. I think this is a pretty rudimentary Turing machine. It is a linear feedback shift register / Turing machine. The hardest things I've ever had to comprehend in modular so far is the shift registers, Turing machine, binary mathematics. I just need things to do these things. I don't want to have to really think about them. And again, you have parameters. So again, they're LFSR parameters, which are similar to what was in the LFSR mode earlier. And then we have something called LGTC. What is that? Logistics. I don't even know what that stands for, but it's a logistics map that provides some kind of chaotic output rather than random. But this has one parameter, and with R being the coefficient of the equation. Man, I love chaos, but I hate smart people talk. They didn't have that math when I was in school. Then for the last DAC mode, there's something called sequencer, and this sequencer actually has pitches. So I was kind of surprised to learn that. So here is, again, an editor. So you pick the note, or you pick the step with the left encoder, and you turn the values, and it goes up by voltages. So if you wanted to, if you're tuned to C and you want to go up to the next C, C2 to C3, you put it at 1 volt, 2 volts, etc., and anything in between. You actually have to figure out what the voltage of a note is to set it in here. Then it also has these playback modes, which is forward, reverse, pendulum, meaning it'll play forward and then backwards. Pendulum 2, I don't know what that means. That wasn't in the documents. Random means it'll jump around. And then an ARP mode. So here's the last thing to really talk about is there's an arpeggiator, which has an up and down, random modes as far as how it swings. What's the range of your arpeggiator? It does a lot of stuff. And that's it, finally, for the Temps Utile by Afterlater Audio. While Temps Utile seems like an unassuming clock tool, it is much, much more, although I will likely only be using it for clock stuff, at least in the short term, till I learn more about it. Meanwhile, let's play you out with the little jam.